Okay, for the first question, the contract question, the offer. So offer is a conditional promise made by one party to another. Uh, this condition is the condition in this scenario is if either of them created a time machine, then they would travel back in time to this certain point in time, and that's pretty much it. Acceptance being something that only the offeree can do. So the offerer can put out the offer, but only the offeree can accept the offer. And in order to accept the offer, it needs to be clear that the offer is straightforward, not a joke, and made in positive form. And in this scenario, the offeree, who is Leonard, is seen signing what we assume to be a contract, but for these purposes we're just going to call it a piece of paper, which may or may not be an official contract, that Sheldon handed to him while being in sound body and mind, without being in the influence of anything, and he's seen as taking it very seriously. So that's the offer and acceptance part of the time travel contract between Sheldon and Leonard. Is there consideration present in this contract? Consideration being the most important element of a contract, where there's an exchange of value between both parties. That there's exchange of value that occurs after the completion of duties. I do not believe there's consideration I do not believe it can be said there's consideration between these two in this contract, in the pretense of this contract, because the action, the duty per se, is for them to come back in time to this point in time, and the only thing that the person who manages to create the time machine and go back in time gets is that they get like a pat in the back and some gratification, which cannot be used because it's not legally sufficient. It needs to be above $1 in terms of value in order for it to be significant and sufficient and valued and be considered consideration. So I do not believe there is any consideration present in this contract, which immediately kind of makes it not a contract. But so do each of these parties have the capacity to enter the contract? Yes, both parties have the capacity to enter the contract. They are within their abilities and the competence. If I'm not mistaken, because I don't watch the series, I think both of them are scientists. Pretty sure Sheldon is somewhere in the physics field, which is this is very much in his field. Leonard, I believe, is somewhere along the same lines. Both parties are of sound body and mind. Both are not under the influence of any drugs or alcohol. So I believe that they are both well within their own capacity to accept this contract. But then again, it's not a contract because consideration. Anyways, is the contract intent legitimate? Intent, of course, requires it to be an explicitly stated element, and the offer must be seen as serious by both parties and must be upheld. So as odd as it is to say this about something that seems so fictional, this contract looks to have been made and signed by both parties in a very serious manner, not drunk, not as a joke, not as a it would be funny, more of yes, if this does happen, you need to come back in this time. So I believe that the intent in this contract is legitimate, but then again, to summarize, it's technically not a contract, I think, if I'm not mistaken, because the consideration, which was the most important part of a contract, was not fulfilled. Moving on to the second question about Verizon and AT&T merging into one company, with people worried that it would cause a monopoly. Are these feelings justified? Yes, of course, because these are two of the biggest telecommunication companies in America. They have two of the highest revenue by far, and monopolies are just one large company. If they combine into each other, there will be a monopoly. There will be one large company that has enormous influence and control over the entire sector and industry. So yes, these feelings are very justified, as monopolies can result in the reduction of quality and innovation in the field, restraint in market competition, as people won't be able to outdo this huge company now because it's got so much more resources, and price gouging will result automatically, as they can look to reduce the prices to push out all competition, and once all competition is out, they can set a really high price that people will have to pay for because they'll be the only company left. Based on my understanding of the Clayton Act, this company will for sure AT&T Verizon combined will for sure be a violation of this act, because the four principles of price discrimination, exclusive contracts, merger and acquisitions, and leadership of two competing orgs, both the orgs will combine into one. So two competing orgs in the organizations in the same field will combine into one. So this is 100% a violation of the fourth principle of the Clayton Act. And for example, with these two companies merging together, becoming one big company, that alone, that's like the most important thing, because without these two huge companies merging together and forming a monopoly, they have very limited ability to influence the market based on prices and exclusive contracts and mergers and acquisitions. So them merging together, two large companies merging into one big company, enables them to manipulate prices, push out competition, and negatively impact the quality and innovation in a field. So that is how this is the example. Just them joining together makes it so they can do everything else that we are worried that they might do. For the third question of being a general manager, I'll explain to them that the union election begins with initial contact between the employees and the union. This can be done in two ways. It's either the employees reach out to the union or the union reaches out to the employees. This can also be done overtly or covertly. Overtly, of course, being with management knowing that's going on, and covertly, of course, with management having no idea that's going on. The reason that they might want it covertly is because this is a long process, can take up to 3 to 4 years, and throughout that time, management may, of course, decide to take actions which they wouldn't want to happen. So sometimes covertly is better. After that, there's a petition phase where some petitions are sent out. Petitions are sent out to the employees to determine whether or not they want to unionize. These petitions are called authorization cards, and they're just to gauge interest. They don't count as votes. By law, 30% of the authorization cards must be returned for the national organization to move forward with any plans. But in reality, 50% of the cards must be handed back in order for an organization to actually begin to get things done, because if less than 50% are interested in unionization, kind of makes you feel as though as a whole the employee base, most people just don't want to unionize. Following that, there's an election phase where the NLRB holds hearings, campaigns to convince employees, and finally that ends up with an election. If the election is a success and the employees decide to unionize, there's a certification phase where the vote passes, the union union representatives are elected, committees are formed, and the union is certified at a national level. Management during the election cannot spy on employees or unions, cannot try to figure out what they are planning per se. You cannot make promises to employees and say, okay, if you stop talking to the union now, we're going to do this, this, and this. It cannot interrogate employees, this kind of goes hand in hand. The fourth part, which is threaten, cannot interrogate them and say, alright, you have to tell us or else we will do something to you. You cannot threaten to make conditions worse unless the employees stop talking to unions. You cannot do all those for spy, promise, interrogate, and threaten. And finally, during the 24-hour bubble, during the actual day of election, management cannot interact with employees. So generally there will be like a holiday, everyone just gets to go back home. What we can do though as management is that we can challenge the union's promise. We can say, hey, listen employees, the union is promising you guys a lot. Are you sure that they can fulfill all these promises? They can even open the union books to prove to them. They say, hey, look, this is the history. They promised this to them, but it never happened. They can of course discuss the hardships of strikes, because during strikes, people don't get to work, people don't get paid, income freezes up, the families might suffer from that. And of course, they can state the company's philosophy and say, hey, our company believes in this, and we can help you do this and this and this. This is again not making promises, this is just stating something that technically is common knowledge. In terms of trademarking for Ohio State, in the question number 4, it is very unlikely that the second attempt will be successful at all, because for your trademark to be accepted and acknowledged, it needs to be as distinctive as possible, and the word "the" is super generic, one of the most generic words in the English language. It is as far from distinctive as possible. It is considered a generic mark, which are marks that are common words referring to goods or services the is used in every other sentence, and sometimes even twice or three times in a single sentence. And due to how generic it is, there is no way that the federal government can protect this. So there's no way that they can trademark just the word the. Can they trademark the something or the something something? They most definitely can. They will be able to trademark the entire word, the entire like phrase, the Ohio State, but there's no way they will be allowed to trademark just the word the. Finally, for the fifth and final question about interviews, will he have any concerns about the questions that were asked that took place about Julia's family and Penn State education? Yes, I believe there will be some concerns because these questions encroach in the field of do not ask questions, which include questions about age, marital status, national origin, race, color, physical characteristics, religion, sexual orientation, disability status, arrest records. Admittedly, in some of these cases, she blasted the door wide open, she flung it wide open and allowed Michael to avenue to ask these questions. But in other cases, he kind of took the initiative and, in my opinion, tried to force the door open slightly. And how do I mean by this? For question one being about her Penn State football season, all she said was that she was a Penn State alumni and that she watched Penn State football games in the fall. That's the only thing she said. But his question seems very intrusive. Asking her about her senior year can be seen as a means to determine when she graduated and rough appropriation of her age, which I think is a big red flag, as I do believe she can take legal action against them because it can be seen as them trying to determine her age, which is a protected class, I believe. So yes, the first question right off the bat has precedence for legal action taken against the Eagles. Second question, also quite an intrusive question about family and personal life. That being said, considering the fact that he did mention that Sundays are probably when most of the work is going to be done, asking about if she's free on Sundays seems like a better way of phrasing the sentence, as he needs to make sure that she can work on the designated day when most of the activity goes down. So there's a bit of gray area here because the question is valid, I think, but he shouldn't ask about her family, which is also one of the do not ask questions that she did not open the door to by any means. I'm not really sure what to say in this area, as like I said, gray area. I think it's bad and that he should avoid it, and that legal action may be taken. This basically, since it's so up in the air and so gray area, in my opinion, it's just dangerous, and legal action definitely can be taken in those gray area situations. So yes, I think this is a lot of cause for concern for the Eagles legal team. And finally, the third question, which is about her grandparents and being from Pittsburgh and questions about their origins. This also falls under the do not ask questions. This is questions about origins. Very intrusive, but I don't think they'll get into legal trouble here because she is the one who opened the door in this one case. Very distinctly, she opened the door and she mentioned that they spent Christmas in Pittsburgh with her grandparents who immigrated in the 1900s. So she opened the door to him in this case. So in this last question, they will not be in danger of any legal problems or attacks. But in the first one, I think he most definitely opened himself up to legal attacks. And in the second one, he is in a very gray area-y spot, which is a bad place to be, I think, because it's better to be not in that kind of situation. And that wraps it up for today. Thank you very much. Have a good Thanksgiving.